The conference room door clicked shut behind me with a finality that made my pulse quicken. Across the polished mahogany table sat Warren Holbrook, my boss of 12 years, and beside him perched Felicity from Human Resources, her tablet glowing softly in front of her. Her expression carried that practiced sympathy they must teach in corporate management seminars: concerned eyebrows, slight downward tilt of the mouth, hands folded in a gesture of false empathy. Warren leaned back in his leather chair with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards in this game. I knew better. I'd been playing chess while he was still learning checkers. The manila folder in front of Felicity told me everything before she even opened her mouth. This wasn't a performance review or a promotion discussion. This was an execution disguised as a conversation, wrapped in corporate speak and artificial regret. I'd seen Warren orchestrate these meetings before with other employees over the years. The pattern was always the same: false concern, carefully chosen corporate language designed by lawyers, and a severance package crafted specifically to silence any complaints or potential lawsuits. What Warren didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that I'd been expecting this exact moment for 3 weeks now. Ever since I'd accidentally received that email chain meant exclusively for his eyes only, the one where he'd laid out his entire strategy to the executive board. Felicity cleared her throat with deliberate care, adjusting papers that didn't actually need adjusting, buying herself a few extra seconds before delivering the rehearsed lines. "Daphne, we genuinely appreciate your 12 years with Northfield Solutions," she began, her voice carrying that rehearsed warmth that fooled absolutely no one who'd been through corporate terminations before. "However, the company is restructuring the entire client relations department. We're moving toward a more contemporary approach that aligns with our evolving business model." Contemporary. That was their polite, legally vetted way of saying younger and significantly cheaper. Code words that HR departments use to avoid age discrimination lawsuits while doing exactly that. Warren finally spoke, his tone aggressively business casual, as if we were discussing quarterly reports rather than dismantling my career. "You've been a solid contributor, Daphne, I won't deny that. But frankly, your position has become replaceable. We need fresh energy in client relations, new perspectives, innovative approaches." Replaceable. The word hung in the air between us like poison gas, spreading through the room and contaminating everything it touched. I'd brought in 70% of Northfield's major accounts over the past decade through relationship building and strategic thinking. I'd personally managed the relationship with Castellan Industries, our single most lucrative contract worth $8 million annually. I'd trained every junior associate currently working under Warren, teaching them everything I knew. And now, apparently, I was replaceable. I watched his face carefully, looking for any hint of discomfort or conscience. There was absolutely none. "I understand completely," I replied with deliberate calmness, my hands folded neatly on the table in front of me, posture perfect. The response seemed to surprise them both visibly. Felicity had probably expected tears, protests, or desperate pleading based on whatever profile HR kept on employees. Warren's eyes narrowed slightly, his analytical mind trying to read my unexpected composure, searching for the trap he sensed but couldn't identify. "Your severance package is quite generous, actually," Felicity continued, regaining her script and sliding the folder toward me across the polished surface. 3 months full salary, continued health benefits for 90 days, access to our career transition services, and a strong letter of recommendation that should help your job search considerably. I opened the folder without visible emotion, scanning terms I'd already anticipated and analyzed. Standard corporate playbook, nothing creative or special about it despite Felicity's claims of unusual generosity. Nothing that wasn't legally required or strategically necessary to avoid potential litigation. "There's also a non-compete clause," Warren added, watching me with increased care now, like a predator studying prey for signs of weakness. "Standard procedure, really. You'll need to sign everything before you leave today." Of course, there was a non-compete. They wanted to eliminate any possibility of me taking clients elsewhere, of becoming competition. The non-compete would restrict me from working in client relations within the same industry for 18 months, a lifetime in business terms. It was aggressive, possibly unenforceable under current law, but designed primarily to intimidate and discourage rather than hold up in court. When exactly does this take effect? I asked, keeping my voice professionally steady and uninflected. We'd like you to clear your desk and surrender all company property by the end of business today, Warren said, his tone brooking no negotiation. Felicity will walk you through the complete transition process, paperwork, exit interview, and the standard procedures. Today. They weren't even offering me a standard 2-week notice period to wrap up projects or transition clients properly. The aggressive urgency told me everything I needed to know about Warren's actual motivations. He was threatened by something specific, and I had a very strong suspicion about exactly what. 3 weeks ago, that misdirected email, accidentally copied to me instead of his intended recipient, had revealed Warren's detailed plan to take full credit for the Castellan Industries contract renewal I'd been negotiating for 6 months. He'd been carefully positioning himself for a major promotion to senior vice president, and my successful contract work was his golden ticket upward. The strategy was brutally simple: remove me completely from the picture, claim the success entirely as his own leadership and vision, then climb the corporate ladder on my work. It was ruthlessly efficient and would have worked perfectly if I hadn't seen that damning email outlining his entire strategy in careful detail to the executive board, complete with timeline and talking points. I'll need some time to review these documents properly with appropriate care, I said, closing the folder with deliberate slowness. Perhaps a day or two to fully understand the implications. Warren's jaw tightened visibly, a muscle jumping near his ear. The terms are completely non-negotiable, Daphne. This is our final offer. Sign today, or the entire offer expires immediately, and you leave with nothing but your final paycheck. Classic high-pressure tactic designed to prevent careful consideration or legal consultation. Create artificial urgency, apply psychological pressure, and force a decision before the target can think clearly or seek advice. But I'd already made my real decision 3 weeks ago when I'd started meticulously documenting everything and building my exit strategy. I'd still like my attorney to review this before I sign, I replied with pleasant firmness. It's just standard practice for any significant legal agreement, especially one with an 18-month non-compete. Felicity shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her HR training warring with legal caution. Warren's face darkened noticeably, reddening from collar to hairline. Your attorney? Daphne, this is a straightforward severance package, nothing exotic. There's nothing remotely complicated here that requires legal review. I met his gaze directly and held it. Then there shouldn't be any issue whatsoever with me having it professionally reviewed. I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow morning, first thing. The silence that followed was thick with Warren's barely contained frustration. This wasn't going according to his careful script. He'd expected this to be quick and clean: pack up, sign papers, disappear quietly into unemployment. Warren stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. Fine. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. But understand this clearly, Daphne, the offer won't improve even slightly. These terms are absolutely final. I stood as well, gathering the folder with steady hands. I understand completely, Warren. Thank you both for your time and for the opportunity to review everything properly. As I walked toward the door with measured steps, Warren called out with an edge in his voice. And Daphne? Don't discuss this with anyone in the office. It's a confidential personnel matter. Violation could affect your severance. I turned back, giving him my most professionally appropriate smile, the one I'd perfected over 12 years of client meetings. Of course, Warren. Completely confidential. You have my word. The phrase tasted bitter on my tongue, but I kept my expression perfectly neutral and cooperative. Once in the hallway, safely away from their sight, I pulled out my personal phone and sent a single, carefully worded text message to a number I'd been holding ready for 3 weeks. It's happening exactly as predicted. Meeting tomorrow at 9 to finalize everything. The response came immediately, almost as if they'd been waiting. Perfect timing. Everything is ready and prepared on our end. Good luck tomorrow. I smiled then, allowing myself that small private satisfaction. Warren thought he was efficiently eliminating a problem employee. He had absolutely no idea he'd just activated the trigger for his own professional destruction. My office felt different as I returned to it, knowing this might very well be my last day sitting behind this familiar desk. 12 years of dedicated work surrounded me on every wall. Awards for exceptional client acquisition hung in neat rows. Commendations from satisfied clients filled the display case I'd installed myself. Photos from company events where I'd smiled genuinely alongside colleagues who'd become real friends over the years. All of it was about to become nothing but memory. I sat down carefully in my chair and opened my laptop, navigating to a secure, encrypted folder I'd created weeks ago. Inside were meticulously organized copies of every relevant email, every contract negotiation document, every client communication related to the Castellan Industries deal. I documented my role with obsessive thoroughness, including precise timestamps, my strategic recommendations at every stage, detailed notes from client meetings, and client feedback specifically praising my personal handling of their account. Warren's name appeared nowhere in any of the actual client communications. Because he'd had absolutely nothing to do with the real work. His only contribution had been taking credit in internal reports to upper management, repackaging my work as his vision. My personal phone buzzed insistently. A text from Brixton Vale, CEO of Castellan Industries. Heard through the grapevine something's happening at Northfield. You, okay? Brixton and I had developed a genuine professional friendship over 5 years of working together closely. He trusted me personally, not Northfield Solutions as a corporate entity. The company was just the legal entity that processed invoices and took its substantial cut. Can we talk? Not on work phone, I replied carefully. Within minutes, my personal phone rang with his direct number. Daphne, what's going on over there? My contacts are saying there's turmoil. I gave him the situation in brief but honest terms. Restructuring. Position elimination. Corporate politics at its worst. I didn't need to spell out Warren's betrayal explicitly. Brixton was sharp enough to read between the carefully chosen lines. That's completely unacceptable, he said after a long, thoughtful pause. You've been the only reason we've stayed with Northfield for 5 years. Their other staff is professionally competent, sure, but you actually understood our business needs and challenges. This was the opening I'd been strategically waiting for, the moment I'd prepared for. Brixton, I need to ask you something important, something that might affect our working relationship. Go ahead, he replied with immediate interest. I chose my words with surgical precision. Our current contract with Castellan comes up for renewal in exactly 45 days. There's a specific clause in Section 7 that allows either party to request specific personnel assignments. Did you know that clause existed? Silence on the other end told me he was processing the implications rapidly. I didn't know that clause existed. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I pulled up the contract on my screen, reading the exact legal language carefully. Section 7.3 states explicitly that Castellan Industries may require continuation of existing personnel assignments as a condition of renewal or may request alternative service providers if key personnel are no longer available through current vendor. Brixton laughed, but it wasn't an amused sound. It was the sound of someone recognizing unexpected leverage in a business situation. And if you're no longer at Northfield Solutions? Then Castellan would have every contractual right to seek services elsewhere without penalty. The contract specifically requires written notice of personnel changes 30 days before renewal discussion. Which Northfield hasn't provided to us, Brixton finished, understanding immediately. Because they're removing you today without informing their client. Correct. That's a material breach of our service agreement. Another pause, longer this time as he thought through options. Daphne, are you planning something specific here? I looked at the awards on my wall, physical representations of 12 years of loyalty that Warren had valued at exactly 3 months severance and a replaceable comment. I'm planning to take control of my own future, I said with complete honesty. If that interests you professionally, I have a business proposal. Brixton's voice shifted immediately to focused business mode. I'm listening very carefully. I outlined what I'd been meticulously preparing for 3 weeks. A new independent consulting firm specializing in client relations and strategic partnerships. Independent, agile, responsive, and led by someone who understood Castellan's business needs intimately. Not a faceless corporation extracting maximum fees, but a trusted partner invested in mutual success. When could you be operational? Brixton asked practically. 72 hours after I walk out of Northfield for the final time. He was quiet for a long moment, thinking through implications. Send me a formal proposal with terms. If it's solid and makes business sense, we'll move forward immediately. And Daphne? Warren just made the biggest mistake of his entire career. That evening, I met Quincy Marsh at a quiet restaurant across town, far from anywhere Northfield employees might frequent. Quincy had been my mentor when I'd first started in client relations fresh out of graduate school, before she'd left corporate life to start her own successful business consulting firm. Over wine and a carefully private conversation, I laid out everything systematically. The misdirected email that had revealed Warren's complete plan. Today's termination meeting. My conversation with Brixton. I was drafting tonight. Quincy listened without interrupting once, her sharp, experienced eyes missing absolutely nothing. When I finished my explanation, she sat back thoughtfully. You've thought this through with impressive thoroughness. For 3 weeks, every angle I could imagine. Every possible response. She smiled with something like pride. You know Warren will try to destroy you professionally. Non-compete clauses, aggressive legal threats, and reputation damage throughout the industry. He won't let this go quietly. I know exactly what he'll do. That's why I need your specific help. Quincy had extensive connections throughout the industry after 30 years of building relationships. More importantly, she had a hard-earned reputation for helping talented professionals escape toxic corporate environments. She'd done it before, successfully and repeatedly. What do you need from me? She asked directly. Legal review of my severance package by someone who knows employment law. Help structuring my consulting firm properly with appropriate protections. And discreet connections to 3 other clients I've worked with who might be interested in following Castellan's lead. Quincy pulled out her phone immediately, making detailed notes. The severance package I can handle tonight through my attorney. She'll tear it apart by morning and identify every weakness. The consulting firm will take 48 hours to structure a properly limited liability company, proper insurance, and ironclad contracts that protect you completely. As for clients, give me specific names. I listed 3 companies I'd personally managed accounts for over the past several years. Smaller than Castellan, admittedly, but substantial and profitable. Each one had specifically requested to work with me personally when they'd first signed with Northfield. Each one had developed relationships with me as an individual, not with the company as an entity. I'll make extremely discreet inquiries, Quincy said thoughtfully. No promises, obviously, but I think at least 2 will be genuinely interested. They're paying premium rates to Northfield specifically for your expertise anyway. Cutting out the expensive middleman saves them significant money while maintaining quality. We spent another hour discussing details, potential obstacles, and contingency plans. Quincy's experience was invaluable. She'd navigated these treacherous waters before and knew exactly where the rocks were hidden. By the time we parted, I felt prepared for whatever Warren might throw at me. The next morning, I arrived at Northfield at 8:30, earlier than my scheduled 9 o'clock meeting. I'd dressed carefully, professional but not defeated, confident but not aggressive. In my bag was the severance package, now marked up extensively with red ink from Quincy's attorney. Also in my bag was a flash drive containing every piece of documentation I'd need, properly organized. My personal phone held encrypted backups of everything important. Warren and Felicity were already waiting in the conference room when I arrived at precisely 9 o'clock. Warren looked tired and slightly disheveled, suggesting he'd spent the evening worrying about my delay tactic. Good. Let him worry. Daphne, Felicity greeted me with forced cheerfulness that sounded hollow. I trust you've had adequate time to review everything thoroughly? I have. My attorney reviewed it extensively as well. I placed the marked-up package on the table between us. Warren's face went red as he saw the extensive annotations covering nearly every page. What is this? His voice was tight. Requested revisions based on legal counsel, I said with perfect calmness. The non-compete clause as currently written is overly broad and likely unenforceable under state law. My attorney recommends specific modifications to make it legally reasonable. Warren slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make Felicity jump. I told you very clearly yesterday, these terms are completely non-negotiable. This is our final offer. Everything is negotiable in business, Warren. Unless you prefer, I don't sign at all. The threat hung in the air heavily. Without my signature, they couldn't enforce the non-compete clause. I could walk out today and immediately start competing directly. Warren knew it. Felicity knew it. The legal risk was suddenly theirs, not mine. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Warren tried to regain control. Finally, Felicity spoke carefully. What specific modifications are you requesting? I slid across a single typed page with clear bullet points. Reduce the non-compete duration from 18 months to 6 months. Narrow the geographic restriction to the immediate metro area only, not the entire region. Remove the absolute prohibition on contacting former clients if they initiate contact first. Warren read the page, his face darkening progressively with each line. Absolutely not. You're trying to completely gut the entire protection. I'm trying to make it legally reasonable and enforceable, I replied evenly. As currently written, it restricts my fundamental ability to earn a living in my chosen profession. No court would uphold such overreach. Felicity looked distinctly uncomfortable now. She knew I was right about the dubious legal standing. Overly restrictive non-competes rarely survived serious legal challenge, and this one was particularly aggressive. Warren, perhaps we should consider, Felicity started. No, he cut her off sharply. Daphne signs exactly as written, or she gets absolutely nothing. No severance, no health benefits, no recommendation letter. Nothing whatsoever. I'd expected this exact response. Warren was letting ego and anger override sound business sense. Perfect. Then I don't sign, I said simply, standing calmly. Wait. Felicity's voice held barely concealed panic. Daphne, let's not be hasty here. Surely we can find a reasonable middle ground. I looked directly at Warren. Can we? Because Warren just made his position crystal clear. His way or nothing at all. Warren stood as well, trying to use his height to intimidate me physically. You're making a serious mistake, Daphne. Without severance, without a recommendation, you'll struggle significantly to find comparable work. And the moment you try to contact any of our clients, I'll bury you in aggressive legal action. I smiled, genuinely this time. Warren, you just made this decision much easier. Thank you for the clarity. I walked toward the door. Where are you going? Warren demanded. I'm leaving. What else would I do? His face was nearly purple now. You can't just walk out. I believe I can. You terminated my employment yesterday. I'm not signing your severance agreement. There's literally nothing keeping me here. I walked out of the conference room and straight to my office with purpose. Within 10 focused minutes, I'd packed my personal belongings into a single cardboard box. Photos of family and friends, awards I'd earned personally, and personal items that held meaning. Nothing whatsoever that belonged to Northfield Solutions. Nothing they could claim I'd stolen. Warren appeared in my doorway, his face flushed and angry. "You can't just walk out like this." "I believe I can, and I am. You terminated my employment. I'm not signing your severance agreement. Nothing is keeping me here." His eyes darted to my computer suspiciously. "That laptop is company property. Along with your phone, your files, your complete client lists." I'd anticipated this exact concern, too. "The laptop and phone are on my desk. Logged out completely, wiped clean according to IT protocols. As for client lists, those are in your company database, where they've always been. I've taken absolutely nothing that belongs to Northfield Solutions." It was technically completely true. Everything I needed, I'd already copied to personal encrypted storage 3 weeks ago when I'd first seen that email. "You're finished in this industry," Warren hissed. "I'll personally make sure of it. I have connections everywhere." I picked up my box of belongings, meeting his angry gaze with perfect calm. "Warren, you told HR I was replaceable. So, replace me." I walked past him without another word. Through the office I went, where colleagues watched with curious and uncomfortable eyes. No one said goodbye. They didn't know what to say or whether speaking to me might endanger their own positions. Corporate terminations created awkward witnesses who preferred to look away. In the parking lot, I loaded my box into my car and sat for a long moment, letting the reality settle over me. 12 years ended. Not with appreciation or respect or even basic human decency, but with Warren's threats and anger. It should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt genuinely liberated. My personal phone buzzed insistently with accumulated messages. First from Quincy, LLC, paperwork filed this morning. You're officially official. Congratulations, business owner. Second from Brixton, reviewed your proposal thoroughly. It's solid and fair. When can we meet to finalize? Third from my attorney, severance rejection documented with witnesses. You're clear to proceed. Good luck out there. I started my car and drove away from Northfield Solutions for the last time, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror. Tomorrow morning, everything would change. I spent that afternoon in Quincy's comfortable office, finalizing critical details. My new consulting firm, Corvus Strategic Partners, was now legally established as a limited liability company. Business insurance secured through Quincy's broker. Professional website is live and impressive. Business bank accounts opened. Client engagement contracts drafted by experienced attorneys. Everything Warren thought would take me months to accomplish, I'd prepared systematically in advance. You're terrifyingly organized, Quincy observed, reviewing the detailed checklist we'd worked through together. When did you possibly find time to do all this preparation? 3 weeks of lunch breaks and evenings. Once I knew Warren's plan, I couldn't stop preparing. It became obsessive. Quincy's phone rang. She answered, listened carefully, then smiled broadly. Hold on one moment. She put the call on speaker. Daphne, this is Thaddeus Crane from Horizon Logistics. We've worked together on the Northfield account. I remembered Thaddeus well. Sharp, detail-oriented, deeply appreciated, thorough communication and proactive problem-solving. Hello, Thaddeus. Good to hear from you. His voice carried careful professional neutrality. I heard through industry channels you've left Northfield Solutions. Quincy suggested I might call you directly. I glanced at Quincy, who nodded encouragingly. That's correct. I've started my own consulting firm focused specifically on strategic client relations. Thaddeus was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. Our contract with Northfield comes up for renewal in 60 days. I'll be completely honest, Daphne. You're the only reason we've tolerated their premium pricing and occasional service issues. If you're no longer there, I'm not remotely interested in renewing. This was exactly what I'd hoped to hear but hadn't wanted to assume. I'd be happy to discuss how Corvus strategic partners might serve Horizon's needs. My rates are competitive, and you'd be working directly with me, not through layers of corporate bureaucracy. Send me a detailed proposal, Thaddeus said decisively. If the numbers work reasonably, we're interested. Warren called me yesterday. Wanted to personally assure me that my account would be handled by him directly going forward. First time he's actually called me in 3 years. Quincy and I exchanged knowing looks. Warren was already in damage control mode, trying to personally salvage relationships he'd never bothered building. After Thaddeus hung up, 2 more calls came in within the hour. Both former clients I'd managed personally at Northfield. Both are expressing interest in discussing alternatives. By evening, I had 3 solid prospects beyond Castellan. Not guaranteed contracts yet, but serious interest. Enough to build a viable foundation. That night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd done. Walked away from 12 years of stability and security. Rejected severance pay that would have cushioned the transition. Launched a business with no safety net whatsoever. It was reckless by conventional standards, borderline irresponsible. But Warren's replaceable comment had crystallized something I'd been feeling for years. I'd built my entire career making other people successful while staying invisible myself. Warren wasn't the first boss to take credit for my work. He was just the first one stupid enough to try eliminating me while I still held significant leverage. My phone buzzed with an email from Brixton. Contract draft attached. He'd moved remarkably fast. The proposed contract with Castellan Industries was everything I'd hoped for and more. 12-month initial term, renewable annually. Monthly retainer plus substantial performance bonuses. The scope of work matched exactly what I'd been doing for them but now compensated directly instead of through Northfield's 50% markup. I reviewed every clause carefully with trained eyes, then forwarded it to my attorney for final professional review. Her response came within the hour. This is excellent work. Very fair terms. Sign it immediately. I did. Electronic signature, legally binding. My first official client was Corvus Strategic Partners. $8 million in annual business that had just walked away from Northfield Solutions. My phone rang immediately. Brixton, calling to confirm receipt. We're official, he said warmly. Welcome to independence, Daphne. How does it feel? Terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Thank you for taking this chance on me. Not a chance at all. Smart business decision. Oh, and heads up. Warren called me this morning before I signed your contract. Tried desperately to convince me you'd stolen confidential information and violated agreements. Threatened legal action if we did business with you. My stomach clenched painfully. What did you tell him? Brixton laughed genuinely. I told him that Castellan Industries chooses its own service providers based on our needs, and if Northfield's personnel decisions made them unable to serve our needs adequately, that wasn't our problem to solve. Then I specifically mentioned that clause about personnel notification requirements. Warren got very quiet after that. Warren would be panicking now, I realized. Losing Castellan meant losing $8 million in revenue and his credibility with the executive board. The promotion he'd been carefully positioning for would evaporate instantly. His entire strategy had depended fundamentally on taking credit for retaining that massive contract. Instead, he'd actively driven it away. Over the next 48 intense hours, 3 things happened in rapid succession. First, Horizon Logistics formally notified Northfield that they wouldn't be renewing their contract, then signed with Corvus Strategic Partners. Second, another former client made the same move. Third, Warren sent me a threatening cease and desist letter alleging breach of fiduciary duty and theft of trade secrets. I forwarded Warren's letter to my attorney, who responded with barely concealed amusement. He has absolutely no case here. You took no confidential information, violated no agreements, and breached no duties. You simply left employment, and former clients chose independently to follow. That's not illegal, it's business. She drafted a response that was professionally firm. I had violated nothing. I had stolen nothing. Clients made independent decisions about service providers. If Warren wished to pursue litigation, we'd be happy to defend vigorously in court and countersue for harassment and tortious interference. Warren backed down within 24 hours. The cease was pure bluster, and he knew it. But the damage to Northfield was mounting rapidly. 3 major contracts gone in 1 week. All followed the same employee whom Warren had publicly called replaceable. The executive board would have serious questions. Quincy called with news that spread through industry channels fast. Warren's been placed on administrative leave. Northfield's board is conducting an internal review of his management practices and client relationships. How did you hear that? I asked, surprised by the speed. I have friends on their board. Apparently, losing 3 major clients in 1 week raised immediate red flags. When they started investigating, they found the email chain Warren sent. The one outlining his plan to take credit for your work while eliminating you. Someone forwarded it to the board anonymously. I hadn't forwarded it. But I knew who might have. Felicity from HR had been visibly uncomfortable during both meetings. She'd known Warren's termination strategy was legally problematic. Corporate HR exists primarily to protect the company from liability, not to protect individual managers. If she'd seen legal exposure, she'd have acted decisively. 2 weeks after I'd walked out of Northfield Solutions, Brixton invited me to Castellan's headquarters for a formal meeting. Not just him, but his entire executive team. They wanted to discuss expanding our engagement significantly beyond the current contract. The meeting went exceptionally well. They appreciated direct access to strategic thinking without corporate layers filtering everything. By the end, we'd outlined 3 additional projects worth substantial fees. Meanwhile, Warren's situation was deteriorating rapidly. According to Quincy's sources, the board investigation had uncovered a pattern of taking credit for others' work and creating hostile environments. Multiple former employees came forward with similar stories once they knew someone was finally listening. 3 months after launching Corvus Strategic Partners, I had 7 active clients, for full-time employees, and revenue projected to exceed $3 million in the first year. I'd hired 2 of the junior associates I'd trained at Northfield, both excellent and chronically undervalued there. They were thriving with real responsibility and recognition. Warren's replacement at Northfield had called offering to match any salary to bring me back. I declined politely but firmly. That ship had sailed. I received an email from Felicity, sent to my personal address. Daphne, I wanted you to know that Warren was terminated last month. The board found multiple instances of taking credit for others' work and creating hostile environments. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner during your termination meeting. I should have. I appreciated her honesty but didn't respond. Some bridges didn't need rebuilding. The damage was done. That evening, reviewing quarterly projections in my home office, I thought about Warren's replaceable comment. He'd meant it as dismissal, as diminishment. Instead, he'd given me the push I needed to bet on myself. 12 years of building other people's success had taught me everything necessary to build my own. The only thing I'd been missing was the courage to walk away from security. Warren had inadvertently provided that final piece. My phone buzzed. New client inquiry, forwarded from my website. Another company is unhappy with Northfield's service post-restructuring. I smiled and opened my laptop. Time to build something that couldn't be taken away. 6 months in, Corvus Strategic Partners had doubled in size. 12 clients now, 8 employees, office space that felt like mine. The revenue projection for year 1 had been conservative, we'd exceeded it by 40%. Industry publications were writing about Northfield's decline and Corvus's rapid rise. Some articles explicitly connected the two stories. Warren had become a cautionary tale in business schools. How not to manage talent. How ego destroys value. How treating people as replaceable creates competition. I received a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. I'm a business student writing my thesis on corporate talent management. Would you be willing to discuss your experience? I declined politely. The story was still too fresh, too personal. Maybe someday, but not yet. Brixton invited me to their annual strategy retreat. Not as a vendor, but as a strategic partner. The distinction mattered significantly. I sat in executive sessions, contributed to high-level planning, and shaped their approach to market challenges. This was what I'd always wanted, to be valued for strategic thinking, not just execution. To be part of decisions, not just implementing them. 1 year after walking out of Northfield, I attended an industry conference. Warren was there, diminished somehow. He'd found work at a smaller firm in a lesser role. When our eyes met across the room, he looked away quickly. No confrontation, no drama. Just a mutual acknowledgement that our paths had diverged permanently. Quincy found me afterwards. How did that feel? Like closure, I admitted. He's not the villain in my story anymore. He's just someone who made a mistake. A very expensive mistake, Quincy observed. For him. For me, it was liberation. That evening, I gave a presentation at the conference about building client relationships. The room was packed. People wanted to know how I'd done it, left security, started from nothing, built something substantial. The answer was simpler than they expected: preparation, relationships, and courage. Know your value. Document your work. Build real relationships. And when the moment comes, dare to bet on yourself. After my presentation, a young woman approached. I'm in your position. My boss takes credit for everything. I want to leave, but I'm terrified. I gave her my card. Document everything. Build relationships outside your company. And when you're ready, I know people who can help. 2 years after Warren called me replaceable, Corvus Strategic Partners had 23 clients, 15 employees, and had just been recognized as one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the region. We'd outgrown our office twice. I'd hired a chief operating officer to manage daily operations while I focused on strategy and client relationships. The work I'd always wanted to do. Brixton called with unexpected news. Northfield Solutions is being acquired. They couldn't recover from losing those key accounts. The acquiring company is gutting management and restructuring everything. I felt nothing hearing it. No satisfaction, no regret. Just an acknowledgement that businesses rise and fall based on how they treat people. How are you feeling about that? Brixton asked. Grateful. If Warren hadn't pushed me out, I'd still be there, making someone else successful instead of building my own success. To replaceable people, Brixton said. May they always prove everyone wrong. That evening, I updated my business plan for year 3. Expansion into new markets. Additional services. Strategic partnerships. Building something sustainable, something meaningful. My phone buzzed. Another former Northfield client, asking if Corvus was taking new business. I smiled and typed my response. Always room for the right partnerships. The lesson I carried forward was simple and permanent. Respect isn't a courtesy you earn after proving yourself. It's the foundation of every relationship. Power doesn't announce itself with titles or volume. It shows itself in choices made calmly at moments that matter. And sometimes being called replaceable is the greatest gift, because it forces you to discover your irreplaceable value. On your own terms. In your own time. Building something that belongs entirely to you.